So again, thank you for being here this evening for the ORCRN's webinar Wednesday. My name is Kai Hushka, board member with the Oregon Community Rights Network. Tonight's topic is water. The theme or the title of tonight's time together is Water is Us. And if you found out about the event through the website or Facebook page, we put this kind of language up to kind of set the scene for us this evening. And it was written that, if you overlay the image of the human circulatory system with a map of waterways in Oregon or the West or wherever you might be, you will see that we are related. Our veins and arteries branch, twist, and connect just like streams and rivers. And despite the importance of water, we mistreat, pollute, and destroy this life-giving resource at a magnitude that has brought us to the brink. The noise that has replaced the sounds of babbling brooks, cascading waterfalls, the slap of beaver tails, breaking the surface of slow-moving water, and raindrops nourishing the forests are mega-droughts now, atmospheric rivers, delivery trucks taking corporate bottled water away, and the posting of signs that says, "Don't drink the water," all due to the extreme pollution. We've lost our way, our sense of connection to water and its importance to life, ours and every being on this planet. We are water. Water is us, but it is too late. Is it too late for us to remember that and to actually change the way that we relate? So tonight's really all about water. We're going to go from sort of topic to topic around that theme, touch on sort of the reality of water today. We're going to leave time at the end to have others kind of chime in on their own experience and relationship to water itself. So we want to make this as inclusive as possible. And actually get into this idea of rights of nature for water and watersheds, and whether that becomes a means of getting us to this different kind of relationship or back to the kind of relationship we need to have with our water, and really to live the idea that water is us. So to kind of help with that, we have three outstanding guests here tonight, invited by the ORCRN. And joining us is Craig Kaufman. Craig is a U of O political science professor and rights of nature expert. Amongst many things that Craig has been involved in, is he has published, I should say co-authored a book called The Politics of the Rights of Nature, Strategies for Building a More Sustainable Future. I've got a web link to that book for those that are interested in it. So Craig is one of our guests here tonight. Welcome, Craig, to the webinar Wednesday this evening. We also have Kunu Berchum, who's a filmmaker, multimedia producer, artist, and Indigenous activist. And Kunu is also a chief petitioner for the Lane County Watersheds Bill of Rights. And then our last, but obviously not least, guest here tonight is Michelle Holman. Michelle is a co-founder of the Community Rights Lane County Group, a longtime rights warrior, and also a chief petitioner for the Lane County Watershed Bill of Rights. Welcome all three of you to this evening. Really glad that you guys are here. The way that we are going to do this evening is really kind of have it be pretty conversational and sort of let the expertise of our three guests sort of carry us through. And like I said, we'll have time at the end of the evening to interact with the rest of you. Like I said, probably have people just drop questions in chat. If things pop up as we're talking, please just drop them, and now we'll keep track of it. To kind of kick us off, Craig and Michelle and Kunu, a lot of our work, a lot of people's work here tonight as activists tends to get wrapped up in, organizing strategies and, how do we leverage the media and what does the law say about this? And it gets kind of almost mechanical at times as we try to do the good work and protect the things that we love, that we often don't hear from one another. What is it that actually motivates us? What is it that keeps us going? That actually has us doing the good work. And so with that, I was really wanting each of you in as many words as you feel are necessary to kind of let everyone know what is your sense of relationship to water. How would you describe that? What have you thought about either in your daily life or in the lead up tonight about just water itself? What does it mean? How do you connect with it? Something in that realm, just to kind of give us a sense of maybe how you're coming to the work in the way that you have, and each of you have different levels of experiences and expertise we're going to hear about tonight, but wanted to see if we can start there, and then we'll kind of move into to some of the questions and themes and conversation items. So, Michelle, how about you starting first, and then we'll work to Craig and Kunu after that.
Sure. Thanks, Kai. And thanks really to everyone for spending your time here with us tonight. It means a lot to us. I am a fortunate soul. I live on a beautiful creek. I actually live on the confluence of two creeks. And so water is every day. I'm a longtime Oregonian, and I grew up in Southern Oregon where it's a little drier. And now I'm up here in the Coast Range where it is very wet. And we give thanks for that daily. I feel a serious responsibility to protect the place where I live. And I see that that's kind of our job, all of us, wherever we live, that we're supposed to be taking an interest in stewarding the places we live. I've got kids, I've got grandkids, I have community members, I have ancestors and future generations. And so to me, this work with water is, it was an easy one. And also it's a unifying one. I mean, I have neighbors who are on the opposite end of the political spectrum from me, who feel the same desire to protect the waters. So, this is a unifying subject, and I think it's one of the reasons why Community Rights Lane County and Protect Lane County Watersheds decided that water was the ticket.
Thanks, Michelle. I'm sure there are other things that may come up as we go through the evening together. Craig, how about you? How would you sort of answer that kind of multi-pronged question?
Yeah, when I was thinking about this earlier, one of the first thoughts that came to me was a realization that my answer to that question would have been really different had you asked me this, before I got my PhD and started studying water for a profession. And so I tried to actually put myself back, in place when I was, a normal person. And I realized the first thing that came to my mind was, honestly, I think, when I was a child and growing up, water was really sort of not just a symbol, but it was the expression of sort of recreation and sort of restoration, if you think of that of like spiritual. I grew up in I grew up in Michigan and the Great Lakes region, and spent all my free time, anytime I could, going to the shores of the Great Lakes, and those are my fondest memories. And now that I'm in Oregon, my fondest memories and what I like to do with my own kids are going into the woods and playing in the rivers and kayaking with my kids and so forth. And so, I think when I'm honest with myself, and if I had to just pick one thing, what does water mean to me? That's what I seem to come to. But the intellectual side of me and what I think about most now is really what Michelle said. Water is sort of the center of all of our social life and our economic life and our natural life and everything else. It really is the unifying factor, because we need water to survive for consumption. There is no substitute for water, right? We need it to grow food. Here in the Pacific Northwest, we use it to make electricity. We use it as a waste dump to take all of our pollution, and we want it to take it away, and so forth and so on. And so like when I think of the slogan, while it's kind of become cliche now, the water is life, it really is apt, because it is the center of life, because it's the lens through which everything gets unified.
Thank you, Craig. Kunu.
Thank you, everyone, for being here. My name is Kunu Bercham. On my father's side, I'm Northern Cheyenne, which is a tribe from the Montana and the front Rockies region. On my father's side, I'm Ho-Chunk Nation and German. On my mother's side, the Ho-Chunk are from the Wisconsin area. And I was born in Eugene, Oregon until the third grade. And then my mom moved us to New Mexico. And when we made that move, I really understood the importance of water. Living in New Mexico for, God, I think it was maybe about 12 years or so, I really understood how important fresh and clean water is because, as you all may know, New Mexico has been in a drought for many, many years, many decades. And so growing up, I always had heard, of these concepts, water is life and the importance of water. But I feel like just in my, few decades on this planet, I didn't really get the importance of it until, like I said, living in New Mexico where, you really have to, every drop of water is important for your food growing, for yourself. The relationship to fresh water in the Southwest is far different than we have here in the Northwest, and it's we have a really beautiful ecosystem that we live in, but I feel like in the Northwest we're comfortably. I think the idea is like what comes to mind is like the frogs don't know that they're in the soup or something because it's getting warmer and it's comfortable. I feel like we have so much fresh water here, but we need to still act as if every drop counts, which it does. And I just want to just say I'm very happy to be here as a concerned citizen. I went to Standing Rock with family members to support the sovereign rights of the tribal communities out there to protect their fresh water. And this concept of having fresh water and the importance of it has been on my mind since I was younger and getting into music and the creative work that I do in my life now. And with that, I want to share actually a little bit of a spoken word piece. And this is, it'll just take a minute, but this was written in the mid-90s by a hip hop artist called Mos Def. And the song is called New World Water. And it actually came out in 1999, but I believe he wrote it before. But, in my creative life, this is when it really, it came to me to understand the importance of fresh water. And, this is practice 25 years old. But it still stands, and it's, we're living this reality now. So the piece goes like this. New world water makes the tide rise high. Come inland and make your house go by. Fools done upset the old man river, made him carry slave ships and fed him dead. Now his belly full and he about to flood something. So I'ma throw rope that ain't tied to nothing. Tell your crew to use H2 in wise amounts, since it's the new world water and every drop counts. You can laugh and take it as a joke if you want to. But if it don't rain for 4 weeks some summers, it's about to get real wild in the half. You'll be buying Evian just to take an effing bath. Heads be acting wild, sipping, pouring, puffing dank, competing for the next man for higher playing rank. See, I ain't got time to try to play Big Hank. F a bank. I need a 20-year water tank. Because while these knuckleheads is out here sweating their goods, the sun is sitting in the treetops burning the woods. And as the flames from the blaze get higher and higher, they say, don't drink the water. We need it for the fire.
Thank you, Kunu. I feel like we should just end tonight right there. And I had a very similar experience moving from the Northwest to New Mexico as you did, Kunu, in the sense of just the stark difference of that region versus where we live here. A lot of us live that are here tonight in the Northwest. Kind of want to pull on what you just said, Kunu, and what Craig, you were kind of pointing to, and feel free, any one of you, to sort of jump in here, which is, what are you seeing either academically, scientifically, firsthand, otherwise, around water and watersheds? You each described your own sense and connection to it and its importance, but what are you seeing out there that has you doing what you're doing in your specific realms, to really advocate and protect water? So what is it that's happening that you're observing or hearing?
I can say right here in Deadwood, living here all these years, 40 some years, the changes sometimes are a little bit invisible, but when aerial herbicide applications are a part of your life, you know that what you can't see can hurt you. When I first moved out here, there were a lot of crawdads in the creek, just red with crawdads. There was a good period of time here where we saw hardly any. They're starting to come back, and I think it's due to the fact that the earth does regenerate, but there's still a lot of clear-cut logging going on, and that has to become a dinosaur. That just has to stop. It's a unsustainable practice, and it affects the waters, not just because we get spray from logging activity, but because when you take the trees off, there's just, those are moisture collectors. So, as Kunu said, we're a little bit complacent because there's still a lot of water here, but there's every reason for us to think that we have to do more to protect what we have left.
Yeah, I can go next. This isn't really what I focus on in my own work, but just as a person, what scares me the most when I think about water in terms of like what I'm observing is the rapid privatization of water, and the fact that very wealthy people and corporations, including many who previously were buying up oil fields as fast as they could because they saw that as a source of wealth, are now shifting to buying up water resources as fast as they can. So some of you may know that T. Boone Pickens, who made one of the wealthiest men in the world, who made his fortune in oil, is now, I think, still one of, if not the largest owners of water resources, meaning he owns more water than anybody else, and he's buying up water resources around the world. Nestle is doing the same thing, buying up as much of the world's water resources as they can. And these people are doing that because they recognize the importance of water, and they're thinking long term. They're looking decades out and realizing that things are going to get a lot worse than they are now in terms of water scarcity, and they believe that's going to make it an economically valuable resource to hold. And so as long as they can hold property rights over it, that's, they see that as the best economic investment out there. And that's more than anything scares me. So again, I mentioned that I'm from the great, Michigan, the Great Lakes region, and Nestle is desperately trying to buy up the Great Lakes as fast as they can, just like they are in many of the watersheds in California and elsewhere. And so it's going to require, people kind of standing up and saying no, like realizing what will happen if water becomes a private commodity that only those with access to enough money can purchase. Because again, there's no substitute for water. It's not like a commodity. It's not a real commodity because there's no substitutes.
Yeah, I'll go next, and I just wanted to add to that. In 2016, as part of the kind of the water protector work that the indigenous communities do that I'm involved with, we were in Cascade Locks, and we were there, and not in large numbers, but we were there very passionately, making sure that Nestle didn't take ownership of the aquifer or the spring there that feeds that comes out of the mountainside there into Cascade Locks. And it was to me that was maybe some of the first kind of activist work specific to trying to keep these corporations from privatizing our local water sources. And really eye-opening to me, and it was a good experience to at least see the what people power and a small group of people that are very passionate about their community can do. And again, it was one of those things where the corporate entity coming in was really trying to divide the community based on like political lines and all of these things. But at the end of the day, the community stood strong and said, hey, we don't need you here for this. This water is more important to us. But I didn't understand the political structure of it that much then. I just understood, just kind of being there as a concerned citizen, community member, and just showing up and supporting however I could. But I do want to say it's pretty amazing that, here in Oregon and in Lane County, that we have the ability to put an initiative on the ballot in this way and really, activate that people power concept to what our community wants. And so I'm really excited to be a part of that and a part of this process and this group of amazing people, and to go on this journey to see how this goes with putting the work for this ballot measure out there. And I'm also really interested in seeing how the opposing forces will do what they will to try and stop our work and our efforts to protect the watersheds of our community. So with that, I'm just, I want to also center on, how important it is that we still have this concept of a democracy here in our community, and that we can do this, because I know that, there are different parts of the world where, concerned citizens like us are silenced and disappeared by these entities. And there aren't, the governments and the power structures that be in those parts of the world, it just is what it is, and people go missing, and these type of efforts are silenced in really awful ways. So I want to highlight that here we have, this American democracy that we need to really lean on, right? And use, if it is, in fact, what it's supposed to be, then we have this opportunity to really put this people power behind it and have our voices and our concerns heard. So I'm excited to be a part of that.
Yeah, I definitely want to get to that with the three of you here in a little bit. I'm wondering though, if I could throw into the mix with the three of you, just maybe expanding on, Greg, what you set up in the sense of just the capability of corporate entities largely to own water. Just the idea that an entity or even an individual can own water, that we have a system that allows someone to have so-called water rights, and everything that goes along with it. I mean, how would each of you describe sort of our current reality, whether it's from the economic lens, the cultural lens, the legal lens? What are we up against these days where we're having to do what you just described, Kuna, in the sense of organizing to stop what seems like common sense, yet there are these forces out there that are just moving forward, and as you also pointed out, Craig, basically trying to control something of which is so critical for life, let alone all the things that happen that degrade water sources. So, kind of back to the original opening question about your sort of connection to water, but, just for everyone that's here tonight, and again, I know a lot of the people who are here have their own expertise and experiences around this, but how would each of you sort of get at that? How would you sort of paint the picture about what we're up against? And then we can kind of get into what people in Lane County and elsewhere are doing to sort of change that.
First I could just say that there's an ORS, an Oregon statute 537.110, as a matter of fact, that says all water within the state from all sources of water supply belongs to the public. So there's that loftiness that our government wants to make us think that that it's all good. We're good, and they're protecting us from folks who would own our water, when in reality, the corporate world is in bed with the government. So, I like the sentiment, Kunu, you mentioned about our democracy, but I would counter that with, I don't believe we live in a democracy, and I think it's a good idea and we should try it. So that's why we, the people, are putting this initiative forward, because the way that the people legislate is through initiatives. That's how we make law. And our voices actually have been silenced. I mean, we've tried and we keep trying. And the reality is that the initiative system, I think when it was created, I don't think that the creators believed we would really use it. And now we're using it, and obstacle after obstacle has been enforced and created to stop us. The water belongs to the people. And so we, the people, cannot rely on the government to protect us or protect the waters. So we're taking it into our own hands. And we are up against the biggest, baddest dog in the yard. They have all the rights, all the laws behind them. They write the laws. Their lobbyists write the laws, the corporations. Those laws get enforced by our government. And we, the people, are really experiencing kind of the short shrift of that experience. So, we say bring it. We are here to protect the water regardless. And I think that we have to really steel ourselves for the big fight, but hey, bring it.
Yeah, I can go next. I think when, if I were to try to describe the problems that we're up against in terms of how water tends to be conceptualized, I think there's really three main things. One is that, first, as I said, water is seen as a resource, and not just any resource, as a commodity. And then the second thing is that there is a focus on water as, well, water tends to be seen as totally separate and disaggregated from sort of the watershed. And I imagine, like, a little bit later, we'll probably get into the different, why it matters to focus on a watershed as opposed to just the H2O molecules. But just as a forest ecosystem is more than just a bunch of trees that are planted together. A watershed is more than just the H2O molecules that are flowing through it. But we don't tend to think of it like that. We don't see how water is integrated into larger systems. And even worse than that, in terms of our political structures that are intended to manage water, water is treated and as a distinct entity depending on different policy spheres. And so our management system, putting aside even whether or not we can sort of manage, nature, when we try, we don't even attempt to do it in an integrated fashion, understanding how water is connected to everything else. We separate, how we deal with water for energy, separate from how we deal with water for agriculture, and that's separate from how we deal with water for consumption, and that's separate from how we deal with water in regards to pollution. And so decision making is just sort of divided in a whole bunch of threads, and which undermines our ability to one, just sort of conceptualize and understand water as it ties together other aspects of the system, but it undermines our ability even to just sort of take coordinated common sense action.
Also, the reality is that current law, it actually protects harmful corporate activity. The law doesn't protect our most important resource. That's why we're saying at this point in time, it's up to we, the people, where we live, to take care of this resource. And as long as the law, these unjust laws exist, then we have our marching orders. We have to create laws that protect rather than destroy.
Yeah, Kuna, I'm wondering your time at Standing Rock, sort of on this very question, like what was being spoken, what did you hear that either spoke to the reality of what we're facing everywhere, but also just the relationship to water that was expressed in that moment as people were trying to do the protection and resistance work that they were involved in.
Yeah. So I want to say, first of all, I totally agree with what Michelle is saying, about, these faux democracy concepts. There's that old sticker, right? Like, trust your government, ask an Indian, something like that. That is basically what became truth to me in Standing Rock, was that, that the forces out there will do what they will without concern for people, sovereign nations who had entered agreements with the local and federal governments, or communities that are just your general American Western communities. The powers that be will do what they will to protect the resources for themselves. But before we get into that, I just wanted to go back to Standing Rock, and also I had a conversation with my partner, with my wife, about this just a few days ago, about remembering that the whole Standing Rock situation was created by the youth of the tribe there. There was a group of young people, teenagers, that organized a run from their reservation, from their river, all the way to Washington, D.C. And that is the initial action that sparked everyone going to Standing Rock. It was the young people of that tribe that made this decision to do this, to raise awareness. And when we talk about resources, we need to think about the young generations, our future generations, right? The 7 generations before and behind, that concept of seven generations. But just as important as, we're talking about fresh water being a resource, our kids are, the most precious resource as well. And they were the ones who created that whole call to action for Standing Rock. And unfortunately, they were actually kind of cast aside once people started arriving. The older generations, kind of put them to the side and said, yeah, thanks for doing your part. We're going to be here, and we're going to take it from here now. And, I'd heard from some young people, or, they had spoken in the media about this, and, we're pretty upset about that, that it was their physical work, their physical commitment and sacrifice to make that run that really started everything. And then once there was all these eyes and this media and this whole kind of just an amazing thing that happened, it was the older generations that kind of took over. And I feel like there's a lesson to be learned there. There's some from us older generations that we need to understand that we need to assist, and I think it's really important that we center the generation of now, the young ones that they may not have voting rights or adult rights, in our country or in different parts of the world, but they're the ones that are really going to be affected by all of this. And as we do this work, we need to make space for them, and we need to allow them to lead, and we need to assist them. And so I think that's just my takeaway from it is, they're the ones that are going to be most affected. And, as we get older, we need to understand that, we've had our time, and we need to assist them and not just, kind of put them to the side. Like, we need to let them lead us.
No, I think that's quite critical, especially if it's about not only the work to bring awareness or resist, but if it's about being agents for change, for that transformation, that kind of circling back. I think, Craig, you said it's sort of that reciprocity piece. That's going to be critical. And, I know all three of you are linked to this notion of nature's rights. Kind of curious, what each of you have come to understand about that term, what it means to you. And I know each of you have had your own time with that in different ways. And I think it might be good in relation to our conversation here tonight, and eventually to get to more specifics about what's happening there in Lane County. But what would you say to the group here tonight about rights of nature and sort of how that works in the sense of water and watershed protection compared to what's happening in the way that you each described here and the way that the current system sees it?
You should start, Craig.
So there's just so much I could say about that. So I think I'll not try to say everything and just start, because I'm sure our conversation will lead into a place where I can add later. I think, when I reflect on sort of, I guess, what rights of nature means to me, I think the most important thing I've come to realize is helping me as someone, who was brought up in, the Western US culture and all that entails, I guess. The biggest transformation in my thinking that's resulted from my thinking about rights of nature has really come from coming to appreciate sort of an understanding of that value, things have value because of our relationship with one another, another sort of a relational approach to rights. Because again, if you study this theoretically, there are many different, theoretical or philosophical arguments about why, non-human things should have rights. Some, animal rights is very proper, traditionally or historically, the animal rights movement has adopted, what we might think of as a properties-based approach or like an attributes-based approach, which is to say, essentially drawing on the history of human rights, where we say, humans have value and therefore rights because, we have attributes that we thought were unique to us, like whether that's consciousness or self-awareness or ability to feel pain. Of course, we eventually came to understand that we are not unique at all in that sense. And so, some aspects of the animal rights movement grew up and said, okay, well, we'll continue and maintain that attributes or properties-based approach, but we recognize that there are non-human animals that share these attributes or properties. And so we should advocate rights for them as well. But I've come to believe that that's not actually a good or helpful sort of logical argument for why we should recognize non-human things in the world as being valuable and therefore deserving of rights. But more important is understanding that the natural world isn't just a set of parts that we can take apart and rearrange as we like to try to manipulate to satisfy ourselves or try to satisfy some problems that humans have. But it's really a system and a living system. And I understand that I'm not saying anything that most of you, if not all of you, don't already know. I'm preaching to the choir here, but this was really my transformation personally, is coming to recognize the importance of really thinking in terms of systems and relationships, and recognizing that humans are embedded in these systems. And that's been helpful for me too, because especially in my teaching, when I teach about environmental politics, so much of environmental politics in the United States, at least, has been this history of this debate between anthropocentrism versus ecocentrism. And one of the things that thinking about rights of nature has helped me to come to believe is that that is a false dichotomy that is unhelpful, that we need to get past, because it reinforces this idea that humans are separate and apart from nature, which is based on this idea that humans are somehow unique and therefore deserving of greater value or something to that effect, and therefore more rights. But when you take a systems approach and you say that everything in these, the natural world is interrelated and interdependent based on these reciprocal relationships, and therefore we're all mutually interdependent, human and non-human alike, biotic and non-biotic alike, then you can get to a place where you recognize that all of the different elements or entities in the natural world have value because of the role that they play in sort of maintaining the overall system. And humans are part of that, right? So it's not devaluing humans. We're humans, so we naturally care about what happens to humans and human well-being. So it's not, it's not non-anthropocentric in the sense that, we should care about the well-being, health and well-being of sort of the ecosystems that we're part of, because our health and well-being is dependent on that, right? Because we're tied into it through these mutual interdependence and reciprocal relationships. It just means that we're not any more or less deserving of value and therefore rights than any of the other entities in the system, right? So it's not purely anthropocentric, but it's not purely ecocentric in the sense that as if humans don't matter. And when my students and I talk about this, I've noticed that I think that really helps students. It's sort of like a big relief to students, because I feel like if you get caught in this anthropocentric versus ecocentric dichotomy, it's really hard to get out of that trap, and it can be freeing to admit that it's okay to care about what happens to people. But that doesn't necessarily mean that we don't value other entities, and once you recognize our interdependence, it can actually be a little bit freeing and empowering in a way.
Yeah, and if you really care about people, then you should give a damn about nature.
Yeah.
So, we are wholly dependent upon the health of our environs. But, just to kind of change the mindset from a community rights standpoint, nature has a right to exist, persist, flourish, naturally evolve, all on her own, regardless of us. We play a role, and really our role should be being better stewards. That really is the challenge here. But, we, as you say, we are nature. We're just another species. We happen to be the most damaging, destructive species. But, we believe we can turn that around and humble ourselves to our role here.
Yeah, and you make a really important point that I feel like is important to emphasize, which is but that rights of nature, it took me a while to fully comprehend or appreciate the implications of this, but these are inherent rights, right? So these are not rights that are granted from humans or that are, come from human law. It's important to recognize that these are inherent, and they were, nature had inherent value and rights before humans existed, and they will if after we're gone. And so it's up to us to recognize that, because it benefits us to do so, I would argue.
I think also, and you'll point to this, Craig, because globally, this is the train has left the station and rights of nature is on the track. But you know, it's really important to understand that we are wanting to legally authorize rights of nature, so that nature can have her day in court if she's harmed, or if they're harmed. I don't really love to use the she pronoun, but I definitely don't like to use the he pronoun. So, but you know, we want to advocate for nature in a court of law, and that is happening globally, where a river is a plaintiff in a lawsuit when it is harmed, or you know, a mountaintop when it is mined.
Yeah, I'd like to get to that, what you just put, Michelle, in the sense before we kind of get, you know, to Lane County, let's say, maybe getting into sort of, you know, what has it look like, or what does it look like in other places, to give people a sense of what it could be like, because I think that's an important piece of any deep transformation, any kind of paradigm shift, is there's a fear, to kind of Craig's point of, you know, the either or scenario. And I think what's happening here, and what you both are advocates for, is it's not an either or, it's a both. And we can have a better existence than we have now. But I guess before we get there, Kunu, any thoughts from your vantage point just on sort of this term rights of nature? Like, I don't know what your own journey has been around this particular idea, this particular work.
Yeah, no, you know, I think the one thing that I would say, and I think it's been to the detriment of tribal nations, you know, within America, so-called America here, you know, with our nation to nation efforts of, you know, trying to understand each other. I think it's been really, like I said, detrimental to tribes, because, you know, like we, as a, you know, just the indigenous way of knowing is like, this concept is you know, is older than humans. And it's like, it's like something that is obvious and doesn't need to be on the books, but, you know, but that's not the case, right? So I think with that, I think maybe the idea of tribal nations doing this type of work, it can be like a low-hanging fruit type of a thing, because, you know, we have our sovereignty, you know, within our borders, the tribes that are federally recognized, and we can, the idea of putting these laws on the books would be I think would be easier, and would be met with less resistance than, say, in a general county or state setting. So just me being a member of a tribe, I'm thinking, as we do the work here, and as the work is being done in different parts of the world, I think it's going to be really great to see different tribes take on these concepts of giving rights to nature, which is something that was like a no-brainer. It's just like a ways of living and being within nature. But that, you know, so one of my tribes, the Ho-Chunk Nation, recently put on their books rights of nature within the lands that they steward in Wisconsin. And I just see that potentially being like one of those things, like when we talk about like a paradigm shift, where there's different tribal nations around the country that are all putting these laws on their books, and within the lands that they govern or they steward. And I think that can be maybe one of these things that just kind of raises the awareness in all these different communities, and, you know, these border towns and border communities between reservations, and the cities and the towns that are surrounding these reservations. So I'm just thinking out loud here, but I think that could be really important for the general movement and raising awareness and paradigm shift concept to have all of these different tribal nations, putting these laws down like officially and kind of just creating that awareness throughout the country. So just what I'm thinking. And I don't know, there's a lot to take in. But I think maybe in closing for my piece here, I want you all to know that I'm very inspired and fired up to do this work. And I'm not, I have a 5-year-old myself, and I'm doing this work for him and for all of our kids out there. And it's at times it may seem like, it's the Star Wars rebels against the Sith Lords and all that. But it's this work is worth it, and it's very important. And I'm inspired, and I'm hoping that you all are sharing that feeling that I'm sharing.
Thanks, Kuno. I think maybe to kind of get to a point, maybe we kind of hear from people who are joining us tonight, and maybe we'll kind of touch on 2 more things. One, I mentioned just maybe providing a sense of where rights of nature has gotten to in either in the United States or in other places. I think will be interesting, and then maybe have that be in the lead in to sort of discuss, the Lane County effort. What is it? Where's it going? Why is it being done? To kind of make it real for people, whether they're in Oregon or not, as to trying to be those effective, positive change agents for that paradigm shift. So, just on the kind of global perspective, obviously rights of nature, the idea has been around for a very long time. It's just being called rights of nature. It's not a new thing, as you were saying, Kuno. It's just something that people did, and somehow we've lost our way. And clearly we have a reality that sees nature, as Craig, you pointed out a number of times, as a thing, as a commodity. And rights of nature is really about pivoting away from that, probably a good 180 degrees. And in practice, though, it's still fairly new. It's only something that's really been out there, let's say in a Western legal construct, for a little over 15 years. So where are we today, though, despite sort of the newness of it all? I don't know, Craig, if you want to kind of start, and Kuno, Michelle, hop in there, and then, like I said, we can get to the Lane County effort, and then leave some time at the end for sort of questions and comments from the audience.
I can try to provide sort of an overview. For those of you who don't know, one of my main projects over the last couple of years has been to create what's called the Eco Jurisprudence Monitor. That's kind of I'll put the link in the chat box. That's kind of a mouthful. Jurisprudence is just a fancy word for legal theory. And it's short for ecological. This is an open access online platform that tracks developments around the world in ecological law. And one of the reasons we call it ecological jurisprudence instead of, say, rights of nature is because one of the things I've learned is that rights of nature is only one way to culturally and legally structure these underlying principles that we've been talking about in terms of sort of the systems approach and valuing things because of their role in maintaining systems and things like that. So in some cultures, like here in the United States, we signal what we value by giving them rights, but in other societies, they focus more on relaying certain responsibilities. And so there are just a bunch of different ways that you can do that. So all that to say that the Eco Jurisprudence Monitor tracks rights of nature laws around the world, but it also tracks other kinds of models that are not necessarily rights-based, but I would argue are essentially meant to achieve the same sort of vision and goal as rights of nature. And so those includes things like protecting sacred natural sites, which are common laws, protecting sacred natural sites, which are common in Africa and elsewhere, and some other places like ecocide laws and things like that. So because I have been running this, I can give you some sort of like stats on an overview. There are actually last time I checked, 339 legal provisions recognizing rights of nature around the world. So this is not an isolated small thing, and there 219 of these have been approved. So when I say there's 339 attempts, these are groups of people, just like Michelle and Kunu's group, who mobilize and try to get rights of nature, recognized in some legal provision. 219 of those, so like roughly 2/3, have been approved. So most of these are successful. A lot of them are in the United States. So just in the United States, there are 134 of these local initiatives, at least. These are the ones that I've been able to identify. And 70 of those have been adopted. So again, most of the time they do get adopted. Since we're talking about water, I'll just note, I guess, that, a lot of times these rights of nature laws identify or define nature sort of broadly or abstractly, in the sense of it's sort of all of the natural world. And so, which is usually interpreted as ecosystems. But sometimes they focus on specific ecosystems or natural entities. And when they do that, by far and away, freshwater systems are the subject of these rights of nature laws. And you see them in, I think, at least now, last time I checked, there were I think 39 countries, if I'm not mistaken, have rights of nature laws, at least have initiatives, on the table, rights of nature laws that have been submitted. Maybe not on all of them decisions have been made. And a lot of these are, Kunu was talking about, tribal nation initiatives in US and Canada, because they have sovereignty, and there are at least 10 of those. I guess one thing I will say, I noticed in the chat, there was the question about, discussing the need for, how this might interact or engage with the Clean Water Act. So I wanted to, I guess, try to indirectly get at that. And I'll do that by also bringing in something that Kunu talked about in terms of, tribal nations doing this in the US and Canada. And it has to do with why it's important to focus on rights of a watershed. And I was thinking of most of you probably know that the Yurok tribe also passed a tribal law recognizing rights for the Klamath watershed. And I talked to members of the Yurok tribe to understand, their decision making and why they designed it the way they did, and so forth. And they told me that, originally they kind of grew out of concern over salmon. And so, I'm telling this story in part to kind of get at the question about the Clean Water Act and because of the concern about protecting beavers, right, a species. So the Yurok initially were thinking of, could they design some sort of law that would strengthen their ability to protect salmon, which I'm sure you all know, are endangered. And so initially they were thinking of maybe like a rights of salmon law. But after talking about it and considering it for a long time, they realized that actually their ability to protect salmon would be strengthened if they recognized rights of the whole watershed as a system, rather than just focusing on the animal species itself. Because if you recognize rights for if the watershed is functioning okay and is healthy and flourishing, the salmon will be okay, right? And so kind of getting at Kai's, I guess one other point I would like to make is talk a little bit about what this looks like in terms of implementation in some other countries where they have stronger laws and it's been around long enough where you can actually see some implementation. And Ecuador is really the main country there, both because you probably all know it recognizes rights of nature in the Constitution. So it's strong. It doesn't have to deal with preemption like with us here in the United States. And it's been around now since 2008, long enough for the courts to actually start kind of, it's one thing to have these general principles in a constitution, but it's another thing to restructure, rewrite your regulatory policy, based on this, to set criteria for how would you measure if, the rights of a watershed are being violated or not. And over the last 5 years, Ecuador's Constitutional Court has been selecting cases specifically to establish this binding jurisprudence about what does it mean to enact rights of nature, and in practice, and what is the relationship between rights of nature and other constitutional rights. And most of the time they're doing this in the context of water-related ecosystems, not coincidentally, right? For all the reasons that we talked about the how crucial water is. And so I wanted to just give you a few examples of how recognizing rights of watersheds in Ecuador has changed the way development and habitat protection works by focusing on, sustaining a healthy, functioning watershed ecosystems. One of the most important cases relates to a watershed for the Arequipa River. And since time is short, I don't want to monopolize all the time. I'll just sort of summarize some of the rulings that the Ecuador's Constitutional Court made that has really transformed the way sort of development works, and as well as sort of environmental protection. So one is that rights of nature has meant that, prior to rights of nature, and the way it works in the United States and most other places in terms of environmental protection, including with the Clean Water Act and Clean Air Act here, is that compliance is basically about compliance with procedural requirements, right? As long as you do your environmental impact assessment and you get your appropriate permitting from the appropriate agency and jump through the bureaucratic hoops, you're good to go. And it's not about compliance with environmental outcomes in terms of the quality of the health of a ecosystem. In Ecuador, that is no longer the case because of rights of nature. Rights of nature has meant that you can no longer get away with, a development project, whether it's mining or other kinds of extractivism or other kinds of polluting activity or overconsumption, just because you did an environmental impact assessment and you got the Ministry of Environment to give you a license or a permit. You have to instead show that your activity does not violate the rights of the watershed. And then the court then has laid out very specific criteria for measuring whether that's the case, which I'll talk about. But another thing they did is they've enacted the precautionary principle. So in the United States, if I'm not mistaken, the burden of proof is on citizens like you all to try to prove that some activity harms some legal subject to such an extent that, it's worthy of defense or so forth, which is almost impossible to do in our legal system. The Ecuadorian court, because of rights of nature, has flipped that. So now the burden of proof is on polluters or extractivists to show that their actions are not going to violate rights of nature, the rights of a watershed. And so then that raises the question, if you're going to do this in practice, how do you measure whether or not a watershed's rights have been violated or not? And the courts essentially created a very specific framework for measuring water-related ecosystem rights in terms of 4 parts: an ecosystem's ability to access its affluents, its tributary streams and other water resources, its ability to regulate and restore its flow, its ability to maintain biodiversity, right? So it's recognizing watersheds as habitats for species as well, and its ability to preserve its natural hydrological cycle. And so there have been various other cases where, to get at the Clean Water Act question and sort of about species protection, they ruled in a separate case in Los Cedros that mining activities were not violated the rights of a watershed because they were going to cause the extinction of an endangered species, which violated one of the criteria for having a healthy watershed, which is you can't damage a watershed ecosystem to such an extent that it can't serve as a viable habitat for species to the point where the species goes extinct. That's a sort of a line that you cannot cross. The rights are violated. So again, it's emphasizing this idea of government regulatory policy has to be based on an understanding of a watershed as an ecosystem that has a bunch of different functions, one of which is providing habitat. And that in Ecuador, were able to gain stronger protection for species by emphasizing the right of a watershed to maintain a viable habitat. So I'll stop there.
No, I think I've also, of course, Craig, been tracking, Ecuador in the way that you have and others, and there's so many important lessons to be learned. And I think one of the big things that you just brought up was the precautionary principle, this idea of assessing what potentially could happen before you allow it to happen, as it's linked to this idea of then assessing, will rights be violated? It is very much the opposite of where we sit today. And I think, as far as my understanding too, I think that sets up why the work in Lane County has emerged around watershed and water protection. And maybe Michelle and Kunu for a few minutes, and then we'll get to some of the questions that are popping up in chat. What would you to say based on everything we sort of covered tonight? Like, what brought you to where you're at now? What is it that you're attempting to do, and sort of what does that look like, not just for Lane County's watersheds, but what is your hope in the sense of other communities and other water sheds or communities related to their watersheds to sort of follow with what you're doing there? How would you describe your moment, I guess, right now, and sort of where that may lead?
No, after hearing all that, I just, I think I just come back to that idea that, of course we need to do the work that we're doing, to protect Lane County watersheds and move forward with that. Yeah. But I just, I'm a visual learner and a visual thinker, and I can see, tribal nations taking on this effort in a expedited way, and just kind of leading by example and showing, and then also with partnership with the county and the communities that are butted up against these different tribal nations, to be a way to, I guess, circumvent this, this big law monster, that, I feel like here in the US we would have to battle with and contend and, get stuck in court, battles for years and decades. I feel like there is this kind of this hack, to kind of sidestep all that nonsense and work with sovereign nations within the borders of the United States, and to kind of fast track the work that needs to be fast tracked. And I don't know, I'm thinking in a chess concept of trying to pick the battles where, and I don't know, it just, to me it seems like a if we're thinking of battle strategy, something where there would be the effort and the time would be rewarded potentially sooner than, you know, battling all these laws that have been set on this book, in our Constitution, you know, by people who thought that, you know, there was endless resources in this country and we could just extract forever and ever and ever. And those are the types of laws that they made.
Well, what brings me to this work is that in 2014, we tried to ban aerial spray. This was our first foray into empowering ourselves because our government wasn't taking care of us. We never got to the ballot, and we even went all the way to the Oregon Supreme Court in the attempt to make the case for the lack of ballot access, and we were denied. So this is a little bit of an end run. You sure can't protect your watersheds if you're spraying pesticides. And this Lane County Watershed Bill of Rights will give us that opportunity to protect what's left and to make violators pay. The other thing that's kind of cool about this particular measure is that we have a prevention provision in there, which says if we think a corporate activity might harm a watershed, we have the right to stop it, to preempt it, as it were. So this kind of work is it's far-reaching and it's exhausting, and we need a lot of people, and we want to see everyone tell their neighbors and show up and help us collect signatures. We thought that we would be collecting signatures right now. We sailed through all the procedural hurdles that we were supposed to satisfy. And then at the 11th hour, one of our famous nemesis challenged our ballot title. So now we're just in that kind of crazy world of intervening into a ballot title challenge. That should take us 2 to 3 months, and we will be on the streets collecting signatures. And the other aspect of doing this work is to light a fire under other communities, because, yeah, Lane County can put out this initiative to protect our watersheds, which we feel responsible to do, but we think that it would really be a stronger argument if other counties were also creating initiatives, empowering their own neighbors and citizens to protect our their watersheds as well. So we do have our the text of our initiative that we want to share with people. In fact, I think, Rob, you're going to put it in the chat. Anyone can look at our work or contact us. I think we'll have our website up there as well. You can contact us. We're more than willing to assist in any way that we can. We've been at this a long time. Actually, Community Rights Lane County started in 2012. And we're not going anywhere because we actually have not reached the promised land. Until we get to what we need to protect our communities from corporate harm, we're here. We're not going anywhere.
Thanks, Michelle. We've got about 10 minutes left, just for those who have been focusing on the speakers and not chat itself. There's different things that have been dropped into the chat, some links and resources. Also want to acknowledge a comment by Thomas here. He said, thanks all. Tonight has started bringing this into focus. It's an overwhelming and many faceted problem, in case others are also kind of in the same place as Thomas is. And then Alexa posed a question I know that Rob has, I believe, tried to answer, where the question was, can those requirements to a healthy watershed be written out or linked? So I don't know, Michelle or Craig or Kunu, if you have any other sort of response to that, either both in what's happening in Lane County or elsewhere where they're, starting to kind of define those elements. And of course, if there's others that have questions, we've got a few more minutes for our speakers to consider those, and then we'll wrap up the evening.
Yeah, I just uploaded a paper where I discuss in detail the framework that the Ecuadorian court created for how they measure water rights, so
Great.
they can access it there.
This is literally civil disobedience through lawmaking. And we understand well that when we pass this initiative, that the corporate boys will not just go gently into that good night. They will sue us because, well, we are denying them the right to, fatten their coffers. We have to get really creative. What are we going to do when that happens? We can battle them in court until forever, but they certainly have a larger army and a bigger bank account. So I think we have to really search our souls. How far are we going to go? What will we do to protect this beautiful blue and green ball floating in infinite space, and our little spot where we are? Because this thing can grow. I mean, I'm inspired by the work that has happened all across the US and globally. That keeps me doing this work. And, we get beaten down royally, routinely, but that only fuels our fire, because we know we're onto something, and we have to take care of this beautiful home we live in. We do this work because we love you, we love ourselves, and we love the honor of being alive.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose like water, right? I mean, water always finds a way. Put up barriers and obstructions, it finds a way. And I guess, Michelle, you kind of gave a bit of a sort of a closing statement just there, but if you have other thoughts, I'll come back to you. But, Craig or Kunu, any sort of last thoughts you want to leave from just, items maybe we didn't touch on, things that you heard from others, just thoughts that might be, percolating in your brains, just to kind of send us off. Let's do that. So Craig or Kunu, whoever wants to go first, and then we'll circle back to you, Michelle, to see if there's additional things you want to say.
I have a quick comment. So I was given a question, and it was about how will the tribes making laws for nature's rights or rights of nature be a quicker way to get rights of nature statutes passed on a larger or broader level? And so for me to answer that question, to me, it just seems like thinking of nature, and I think it's just human nature, right? It's like where that, like, there's these studies that have like happened where there's like someone in in a public space, and a group of people will like take off their hat for some reason, and then like other people start taking their hat off because they think that's like the thing to do, or like, it's just we are pack animals, and I think that just to me, like I was saying, thinking visually, like your neighbor's doing something, your neighbor has greener grass, you want to try to get greener grass. That's what I was thinking about, just like a conscious decision to try to do better if you see your neighbor trying to do better. That was my idea when I was thinking of tribal entities, tribal nations doing this work, and then it being kind of relayed out in media, right? It could be something where communities start saying, hey, well, that sounds like a good idea, we should do that here too. So that's what I was thinking with that. But I do know that the work that Kai has done, and the different folks that he works with, they actually worked with my tribe, the Ho-Chunk Nation, to develop those laws for our constitution. And I don't really know how that all happened, but it's really interesting. I'm trying to learn about it myself. And I think it's just one of those things where it's like a paradigm shift concept. That's what I was speaking.
Thanks, Kunu. Craig?
I guess I'll just quickly try to build on Kunu. I think Kunu was exactly right, where in my opinion, the ultimate purpose of all this work is to try to enforce and facilitate a paradigm change, because I mean, you can only do so much through coercion through the courts or whatever. That's real, ideally, we need to get people to just undergo this paradigm change, so we voluntarily change our own behaviors in a way to coincide with the ways human societies used to always live, as Kunu was saying, right? And so I guess for those of us fighting this fight that can seem like an impossible fight, I would just point out that, you know, you can see success in this work, even though, you know, you go through all this and maybe it gets struck down by a court through preemption or what have you. There are still, I think, signs that this work is successful because of the tremendous and rapid growth in the number of other communities that are launching these kinds of initiatives. As I said, now there are at least now 130 some across the US. And not that long ago, there was just a handful. And I think we are seeing what Kunu described, which is you see one community doing it and others are saying, I'm fed up too. Why don't we do this? And the nature of systems change is that you work and work and work for a long time and nothing seems to happen. And then all of a sudden you hit a tipping point and things shift. And then, you know, there's this rapid dramatic change to a new stasis of the system, right? And I truly believe that's kind of what's happening, and that it's important to remember that, because that's, I think, what can help sustain us in a project that may just seem impossible to achieve.
Thank you, Craig. Well said. Michelle, any last words for our remaining seconds here?
It's no secret that the systems are failing. Current systems are not protecting our watersheds, certainly, and systems in general are in dire need of a very microscopic, like at the core look to shift. And some of us think, well, hey, let's just start over. I mean, really, what is good about what this is all based on? There's also something so joyful in rabble rousing like we do. You know, we call it, we see it and we say it. We call out the BS when we see it, and we're not apologetic. And that's incredibly empowering. And, you know, just living a purposeful life, I don't know, you can't really underestimate what that's about. So we have no shortage of fun in our organization. We laugh a lot in the face of all the craziness that's going on. It just feels like a beautiful community that is on to this kind of work that says things are not working, and we might have a clue as to how to shift. We don't have all the answers, and it's one reason why we do these webinars and talk to people outside of our organization. We're open to hear new and exciting ways to beat down the big beast, but we are coming for the beast. There is no question. We owe it to ourselves. It's our responsibility. We owe it to future generations, and we stand on the shoulders of giants. I mean, you know, ain't no reason not to be involved. So join us.
Beast beware. Well, on behalf of the ORCRN, Michelle, Craig, Kunu, thank you very much for your time tonight, everything that you shared. Also, thank you very, very much for everyone that was able to join this evening. Like I said, we were recording this, so we'll try to get it up on the ORCRN YouTube channel. We can even send it out to any of you who signed up tonight. So we'll circulate that link once it's live so you can share that with others. And we'll be having, I don't know if it's next month or the month after, another webinar Wednesday from the ORCRN. So if you're not already on the email list, you know, go to the website and sign up so that you can get notified. But again, thank you everyone for being here tonight. Appreciate again our three presenters, and have a great evening. Thank you.